Good afternoon. Thank you for attending today's webinar, a crash course on digital transformation and reskilling for federal agencies. My name is Mary Tobin. I'm an account director at Meritalk, and I'll be your moderator today. I'd first like to thank Coursera for sponsoring today's webinar. I'd also like to thank our panelists as well as the audience for joining. I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy. Before we get started with today's discussion, I'd like to cover a couple of housekeeping items. First, today's webinar is being recorded, and an archived version will be available after today's program. We'll send a note out with a link for all participants. Second, today's discussion is intended to be interactive, so we really do encourage you to participate in the conversation. And how you'll do that is by including your questions or comments in the questions box on the floating toolbar. So what you can do is just type in any questions or comments you have, hit submit, and then we will try to get to as many of your questions as possible during the Q&A segment. Let's get started. During today's webinar, we're going to discuss how federal agencies are increasingly using data to power their mission and to drive outcomes. We're also going to talk about the critical need for digital reskilling as agencies modernize at an increasingly faster pace. With that, I'm really excited to welcome our guest speakers this afternoon. First, we have Sachi Kuwabara, who is Director, Risk Management and Operational Integrity for the Division of Emergency Operations at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We have David Pearson, Center Director for Engineering and Technology for the Defense Acquisition University, and Emily Sands, Vice President, Data Science for Coursera. Thank you all for joining me today. I'd like to get us started by having each of you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role and responsibility. Sachi, we're going to start with you.
Great, thank you, and thanks for having me this afternoon. I serve as our Director for the Office of Risk Management and Operational Integrity in our Division of Emergency Operations. I also serve as the lead for our Deployer Support Unit in the COVID-19 response at CDC. My formal training, though, is in psychiatric epidemiology and biostatistics, and prior to coming to CDC, spent some time working internationally, both at WHO and also with the International Medical Corps in Jordan, working with displaced populations, studying resilience and positive adaptation. I've been at CDC for about 5.5 years, and I've been in the field of public health for almost 12 years now, which is hard to imagine.
Excellent. But thank you so much for looking forward today. Thank you. And David?
Sure. Hey, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to speaking with all of you today. Again, my name's David Pearson. I'm the Director of the Defense Acquisition University's Engineering and Technology Center, where together with a great team of experienced professionals, we drive the university's curriculum in the training of the Department of Defense's acquisition professionals in the technical subjects. Everything ranging from science and technology management to systems engineering, production management, information technology, and increasing areas such as data science and DevSecOps. So that's what we do here in my shop. Prior to coming to DAU, I spent most of my time at sea as a naval officer, and I'm really glad to be with you today.
Excellent. Thank you for your service. And Emily, can you tell us a little bit about your role and about Coursera's role in the public sector?
Sure thing. Thanks, Mary. It's great to be here today with you and Sachi and David as well. I'm Emily. I'm the Vice President of Data Science at Coursera. Many of you may be familiar with Coursera as the world's largest platform for higher education. We partner with about 200 university and industry partners, so Stanford, University of Michigan, Google, to provide high-quality, career-relevant, and hands-on learning and credentials. We have courses that span the domain, but are founded by 2 machine learning scientists from Stanford, and so one of our sweet spots is absolutely data science. And in addition to reaching over 70 million learners directly, we also help governments drive digital transformation with strategic and job-based learning programs to develop mastery and critical skills. So over 330 governments and 2,400 companies use Coursera today to reskill their workforces. It includes leading government agencies like Defense Acquisition University, but also the state of New York, the country of Costa Rica, and global organizations like AXA, Novartis, and P&G. I've been at Coursera almost 7 years. I lead Coursera's internal data team across data engineering, data science, and machine learning. I'm also a labor economist by training, so getting folks the skills they need to reach their full productivity for themselves, for their employers, for their societies is near and dear to my heart. And I head up our Data Science Academy, which is aimed at helping institutions realize the value of their data by driving data literacy across the org, by upskilling data talent in key tools and methods and environments, and finally by reskilling folks for some of those really hard to fill data roles. I'm delighted to be here today.
Great. Thank you. I'm excited to begin our discussion. So let's get started. So federal agencies increasingly are using data science to power their mission and to drive outcomes. So let's start our conversation today with discussing how the role of data is changing federal government and how it goes about its mission. So Emily, we're going to start with you. Can you tell us about the growing importance of data science in the public sector, both in general and in light of the climate in which we're operating today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all here today because we know that data is a strategic asset that can be critical to success for federal agencies. The 2019 executive order on maintaining American leadership in artificial intelligence shows the government's increasing focus on technical leadership in AI and ML as critical to economic and national security and also overall quality of life. Just last month, Department of Defense released a new data strategy, as well as its plans to transform into a more data-centric organization that uses data at speed and scale for operational advantage, for increased efficiency. And so, what are the core opportunities? As I'm talking to data leaders in government agencies almost across the board, there are three big opportunities for data science and ML that come up again and again. And obviously how they manifest differs by agency, but the broad opportunities are strikingly consistent. The first big opportunity is around decision science. So I like to think of this as better decisions faster, right? We've all seen how data can provide a common language, a common optimization function for the organization, and how that alignment can really support high quality decisions at every level, whether those decisions are fully automated or human made. So that's the first. The second big opportunity is around developing ML-powered digital experiences. So ultimately, this is about delighting partners and citizens with technologies and services that wouldn't be possible if it weren't for data and harnessing that data through machine learning. And then the third big opportunity is around automating costly human workflows, providing services with higher quality and lower cost by building a combination often of fully automated solutions for the most routine tasks, and then for more complex tasks, developing human-in-the-loop systems that enable individuals to be more efficient and empowered by predictive insights. And I think, you asked a bit about the current environment. In all three of these areas, in decision science, in building digital experiences that are powered by ML, and in automating costly human workflows, the opportunity is bigger now than ever before. And some of this has been sort of a steadily increasing opportunity over time, aligned with technological advances. Think, increases in compute power and the quality and efficiency of data-related platforms and services. But there's also been a big step function change this year. And there are a lot of bad things to come out of COVID, but with the current pandemic, both more experiences are being digitized and more workflows are being digitized. And that means more and richer data is being collected. And so now more than ever, we have this opportunity to harness organizations' unique data, whether it's for decision science, for developing those digital experiences, or for automating human workflows. And most often what we're seeing agencies lean on is sort of a combination of those opportunities. So, in all three areas, the opportunity is tremendous. It was growing over time, step function change with COVID, and really excited about what's ahead.
Awesome. Great. Sachi, kind of building on that thread of the pandemic, can you discuss the role of data science in addressing the pandemic via the CDC?
Yeah, absolutely. Data science has played a really central and critical role in addressing the pandemic. I can't think of, a question that we've been asked and that we haven't involved data science, or that data science hasn't been involved in answering. From tracking cases and deaths to understanding population movement and hospital supply chains, core to public health emergency responses, understanding infection transmission in time, place, and person, and identifying risk factors for the disease, but also guiding effective interventions. I liked, what we just heard about decision science. CDC has a 70-year history, honestly, of putting data and science into action to be able to prevent, detect, and respond to new and emerging threats. And a lot of that is about getting the right information into the right hands so that we can make the right decisions. In the current COVID response, we're using data to model cases, hospitalizations, deaths, to trace people's movement in order to understand how the pandemic is evolving, and also to deploy staff to support our states and local jurisdictions. I'm in the business of emergency response operations, and so from our perspective, in a pandemic or health crisis of any kind, quite frankly, time is everything. And so our ability to quickly and safely deploy resources to the places that they're needed most depends on having quality data and data that we can trust. And data science and advanced data analytics are really helping us to provide better deployment insights and inform that decision making, which ultimately enables us to deliver on mission, right, to the American public. So the COVID pandemic, I really think, has underscored our need for data that move faster than disease. It's highlighted the need for timely, accurate, and automated data that can be used for public health action and emergency response. Data science is needed to not only develop the models, but also determine how they're wrong, because those models inform, along with other data, decisions to combat the pandemic. And, the COVID-19 pandemic has confirmed not only the need for data sharing to include new non-traditional data sources, but also the need for rigorous evaluation and ethical frameworks as well. So building public trust through communication strategies and then demonstrating a commitment to proportionate data privacy, I think, are also imperative. And ultimately, I think the pandemic has further emphasized the need to modernize, and it's really delivered that powerful drive to make it happen.
Excellent. Thank you. And David, from the DoD's perspective, obviously is a leading innovator and adopter in terms of using data, whether that's through AI or any other myriad ways. Can you tell us how you see the role of data continuing to change across the DoD, and what is DAU's role in supporting and advancing that?
Yeah, sure. So this is a great question. Thanks. Historically, far too many of the decisions we've made in DoD have been driven by anecdotes, relationships amongst the people in the room, or simply the dated opinion of the senior-most person in the room. I think you're starting to see a shift where our goal is to let data in the information it provides guide future decision-making. And that's going to be critically important going forward. I also see an expanding role for data across the DoD. As Emily mentioned earlier, we've got a new strategy which has hit the streets. It came out, I believe, on the 30th of September. And it calls for the department, among other things, using data to provide a competitive advantage. And that advantage extends in two dimensions, if you will. First of all, to our people in the field, our war fighters, those serving at sea, those navigating our aircraft, those in the field, so they can make better decisions in an operational context. And then the second area are those people who support them, such as the acquisition community, where we're making countless decisions, spending billions of dollars of the taxpayers' money to try to make good acquisition decisions or business decisions in support of them. And then you take that one step further, and that it's not just making better decisions, but also about the speed at which decisions can be made. Getting into the operational decision-making process is critically important for success, and I think data is going to be one of the ways of enabling us to do that. The strategy continues to go on to talk about how it feels that all DoD leaders must treat data today as a weapon system. And we have to learn how to manage that information and that data in a secure environment to maintain that competitive advantage. Now, where DAU fits involved here is to, again, leveraging that strategy. And it's the idea of an element of the strategy which calls on focusing on both talent and culture. Certainly, any increased use of data has to be based upon a foundation of a workforce that grasps and fully embraces data as a way to help them solve their problems. And that's where DAU can help use its training platform to do that. Using our corporate university model, my goal is to train the DoD acquisition workforce and help them use data to shape and inform the endless decisions, the countless decisions that they're making every day, whether it be a program manager trying to manage his resources, trying to oversee programmatic decisions, or even technical decisions that need to be made on a particular program. So again, I think you see an expanding role for DoD with respect to data, and the university's role is to facilitate that cultural and talent requirements to support the strategy.
Perfect. And that's a great segue into our next question in terms of the skills and the reskilling that needs to take place. Before that can begin, one really needs to understand the skill gaps that exist. A statistic that I found really fascinating was that the Office of Management and Budget announced or estimates that approximately 400,000 federal employees will need to be reskilled by FY 2021, and that's about 20% of the current federal workforce. The need for upskilling is particularly acute in the area of information technology and data science as agencies continue to embrace modern technologies. In terms of, Sachi, from your perspective, what types of skills are most needed today to help agencies make the most of their data? And how are those skill gaps really holding agencies back?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we need employees who really can lead the workforce in infrastructure management and governance of data collection, storage, use, and integration. That includes advanced technology management and development, really management of that end-to-end data process and the entire data lifecycle. And then the skills to support rapidly evolving infrastructure systems and tools. We also need employees who can operate at that intersection of public health, data science, and epidemiology to really further public health knowledge with the use of data science. And I think, while CDC has a strong background in understanding public health and even understanding data, I think as we look at data as a strategic asset, really translating those skill sets into looking at the operational aspects as well. So especially in terms of our preparedness and response, capabilities and our ability to really push forward on some of our strategic priorities and address some of the nation's most formidable health threats. When it comes to, sort of fostering faster innovation and leaning into the future, I think, while modernizing our data systems will be critical, I also think we need to reframe our mindset a little bit. And so not just talking about the technology, but also asking about how data can help us to answer tough questions, but also automate the answering of easier ones. Digitalization has created this opportunity to morph our business models from linear to more dynamic, asymmetric, and really three-dimensional. But, people and culture have struggled to keep pace. And so this reliance on some of our outdated technology has led to a workforce that is really insufficiently equipped to transition into more modern ways of doing business. And I think we sometimes fall into that trap of protecting our existing business models instead of trying to advance something much bigger than ourselves and adapting or advancing our practices. But I do think that there are really huge opportunities to drive change, and it just requires a shift in how we think about data, how we visualize data, to inform and empower decision making, as we've been saying. And it also means a shift from manual tasks and routine tasks to that more strategic, critical thinking, really understanding and applying what's critically important about data and using that information to strategically lead and balance our priorities.
Perfect. Thank you. And David, same question for you in terms of what skills are most needed and where the skill gap might be holding back agencies, in particular the DoD.
Yeah, great. I think there are many levels of skills that are required by the workforce today. But I think that a prerequisite which has to happen is to make that cultural change. And the phrase I'm hearing an awful lot, and I have to admit I don't fully understand it yet, and that is the idea of promoting data literacy across the workforce and trying to find out exactly what data literacy means, what skills a particular person has to have in order to demonstrate data literacy. That's something I am really wrestling with as I try to build out training products for the workforce. For example, does everyone really need to be able to program in Python to consider themselves data literate? I don't think so. But I do think everyone needs to have a basic appreciation of some statistics in order to be able to properly interpret data and be able to use it to support their decision making and to be able to critically assess the information that they're giving. So the first area of skills is to build that data literacy across the entire workforce. And for me, that's a difficult thing right now. And I'm constantly looking for help and conversations on that area. Going forward, though, when I think about skills, I think it's very much roles-based. We have our workforce is 180,000 people, and we're building everything from submarines to satellites to software. So dependent upon the domain you're working in, the service you're in, the skills you need will depend upon your role. If you are in a test and evaluation role, your use of data is very, very different than somebody who's doing cost estimates, which may be very, very different than someone who's trying to oversee contracts. So we need to develop, I think, what I'm calling skill lanes or tracks almost, where we develop a role-based series of learning assets that really tailor the training to the specific skills that role that you're serving in now requires. Additionally, you need to have the flexibility to shift tracks. So as your domain changes or as your job changes or you just advance in your career, you might need to go to an additional lane or a different alley, a different set of skills for you to go ahead and develop. And the final thing I'll say about the skills ideas is to please appreciate that in DoD, particularly in the acquisition area, we're spending an awful lot of time working with our industry partners. And we need to be able to critically assess the work products and the deliverables that our contracting partners are giving to us and be able to oversee their work and ask those critical questions to make sure that the taxpayer is getting their value and the warfighters are getting the systems that they so desperately need. So that's kind of my take on the skills area. The final thing I'll say about that is one of the challenges that we've got in making this pivot is simply time. Our people are working very hard every day, just keeping up with their current workload. And if there's one impediment to us to making this pivot to a more data-driven organization, it's giving them the time they need to train up and obtain these skills. It's a really difficult thing. I can't tell you how difficult it is to me to have conversations with students. And I ask them, well, how much time is your boss giving you to work on this project or on this course? And it's shockingly little. And I'm finding that our students and our employees are having to spend so much of their time, their own time, away from the workplace on the weekends and on the evenings to pursue the professional education that they need. So if I were to identify for you to answer your question, one impediment to making this progress, I would say it's giving the workforce time to actually complete the training that they need. Great question. Thanks.
Thank you. Great response. And Emily, from the perspective of Coursera, what are you seeing in the broader market with regard to the need for upskilling to help organizations make the most of their data?
Yeah, I mean, Sachi and David put it so beautifully. I couldn't agree more. Zooming out, what I hear are sort of three significant challenges in building data-first organizations. The first is about getting current staff key technical skills. So generally those technical skill gaps fall in a few different buckets. One is that today open source languages, think Python, are flexible and cheaper and standardized, and yet current staff have often been trained in more legacy languages. So a lot of what I get is, hey, how do I retrain my SAS folks and get them up and running in R? A second bucket is that a lot of the opportunity created from data today demands a broader toolkit of applied method than staff usually had in their academic training. So a very common example is folks trained in traditional statistics or even machine learning 10 years ago were focused almost exclusively on quantitative data. But so much of the rich data that's being captured in the world today that we have the opportunity to harness is textual data. So how do we get staff ramped in natural language processing? Or it's image data in computer vision or similar. And so it's really leading with the data we have, the applications we want to build, and then saying, what are the methodological gaps that we can retool staff in? And then the third bucket really is, there's been a huge opportunity unlocked by being able to work efficiently in cloud environments on data platforms like Google Cloud Platform and Amazon warehousing services, and even more niche tooling like Databricks. These platforms are reliable, they're flexible, they're resource saving, but staff is often used to on-prem and homegrown solutions, and so they need training to ramp. So that's really the first big challenge, right? Whether it's the programming language you use or the methods that you're comfortable with or the tech stack that you're used to operating in, current technical staff actually lacks key technical skills for those transitions. The second sort of bucket of challenges is that agencies need a cultural shift, and David spoke to this so beautifully around over-reliance perhaps on the dated opinions of the most senior person in the room, but also, a cultural shift for both data-driven decision-making and to adopt data-powered solutions. And so senior government leaders are making huge, monumental decisions about data and emerging tech like AI, and they're often doing this without background or previous knowledge. So as I think about data literacy, it's everyone on staff needs basic data literacy in two areas. No, not to program in Python, but first, a basic understanding of statistics, data visualization, and metrics. So how to make data-driven decisions. And second, no, not actually knowing how to build neural nets, but an understanding of AI and ML, what's possible in order to partner effectively with technical teams. And ultimately, this comes down to educating and getting buy-in from stakeholders across the org, building trust in the models. One data leader, I laughed, I spoke to him recently, and he was describing a conversation in which another senior leader had told him, you're doing this great magic, but I just don't trust it. And I'd rather use the rules that I have, that I've used forever, even if your models show that my rules are only performing at 30 or 40%. And so this comes down to change management, right? Getting data-driven decision-making and ML to work in an organization is a cultural shift as much as it's a technology shift. And leading that cultural transformation demands investing in broad-based data literacy. And then third, really briefly, sort of beyond the challenges with sort of skills of the current technical staff and driving that cultural shift with literacy, I think the third challenge is that hiring is slow and expensive. It's hard to compete with the private sector for experienced talent. And as Sachi spoke to, there's actually a lot of upside. Even if you could hire enough from the outside, there's a lot of upside to having folks with the domain expertise and the agency knowledge who know how to operate internally and know how to be successful. In her case, it's the intersection of public health and data science, but, across the board, across agencies, we're seeing a lot of upside to looking at current staff and identifying opportunities to retrain them for some of these hard to fill data roles. So those are kind of the three core challenges: upskilling the existing technical staff, driving literacy across the organization, and then reskilling select folks for in-demand data roles, acknowledging that the domain knowledge and the experience with the agency that they have is so valuable for the organization. And if you can get them the technical skills to close the gap, it's a really powerful alternative to hiring.
Excellent. And that retention is critical for sure. Excellent. So 2020, COVID changed everything. It was absolutely critical to move online, to move remote. especially as the federal workforce moved to telework at scale and remains there today. So let's talk about how COVID-19 has further accelerated the need, perhaps, for digital upskilling, as well as presenting new challenges. And Emily, I'm going to go back to you first for this, and then we'll have the other two panelists weigh in as well. What are you seeing and experiencing from the perspective of Coursera as a leading developer and provider of training and learning programs for students, enterprises, and the public sector?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been absolutely humbled by how the world is increasingly turning to online education in these times. Relative to just before the pandemic, we have 4 times as many individuals coming to Coursera directly from, for their own individual learning. We have 5 times as many individuals coming through their enterprise employer, and we have 9 times as many individuals coming through government programs, both for government staff as well as workforce development programs for citizens who need support reentering the labor market. And the truth is that, building high quality data skills learning solutions from scratch is hard. It's always been hard. Federal agencies know they need to improve data skills. They largely understand the training outcomes they're trying to achieve, but it's hard to create a deliberate training pathway. It's hard to identify which skills are right for which populations of people. It's hard to ensure those programs have the breadth and also the depth for people who are upskilling and reskilling in data, and then making sure the solution is customized to the particular agency. And then it's gotten harder because now we also need these upskilling programs to be built for scale. Traditionally, in-person training models could send a handful of people to data training annually. First of all, those increasingly aren't meeting the demand. And second, a lot of those in-person trainings are off the table in the current COVID environment. And so, there are a number of effective training programs that I'm seeing. They tend to center around a couple attributes. One is they're comprehensive. So yes, they're upskilling talent to get existing staff ramped, but they're also driving literacy across the organization, recognizing the need for this cultural shift, and they're reskilling internal folks for those hard to fill roles. Not all programs start with all 3 pillars. David talked about sequencing, a literacy component and then an upskilling component. It's not uncommon, for the agencies we partner with to focus first on one dimension and then expand to others, but ultimately they move towards a comprehensive solution in order to become a fully data-first agency. And then in addition to being comprehensive, the most effective programs are also focused. And I mean that in a very specific sense. They're focused on developing the right skills by role and function for the jobs to be done. So not everyone needs to understand causal inference. Not everyone needs to be learning neural nets. Not everyone needs to be able to code in Python. The best programs are really tailored to develop the right skills by role or function for the jobs to be done. And that's really the core: comprehensive and focused training programs that develop the right skills for the right people, and that can scale even in the current environment. So we've been just humbled by the surge in demand on the platform, yes, from individuals, yes, from enterprises, but above all from governments, and we're really grateful for the partnership.
Awesome. And Sachi, in terms of the CDC, how is the CDC capitalizing on new opportunities and technologies to upskill in both the short and the longer term?
I think, as Emily was just mentioning, I really think that crisis actually often provides us with opportunities to push us sort of outside of our comfort zone. When it comes to our emergency response operations, just as an example, we deploy scientific experts and often have to coordinate the delivery of supplies and equipment to the incident site. And it's all about getting the right experts to the right place at the right time to protect and save lives. But siloed data, legacy systems, outdated technology have made our ability to rapidly identify those right experts for the right role a challenge. And because our data is stored in so many different places and separate systems, it means that our business processes are swamped with manual tasks, and we lack that ability to really analyze all the relevant data on an issue in real time. And so emerging technology, provides an opportunity for us to really re-examine some of our current processes and procedures, to explore new ways of doing business, to streamline our reporting even, and to minimize burden on our mission delivery, but still maintaining program accountability. And so, we've talked about it already, but when we think about retooling and reskilling the workforce and capitalizing on such opportunities, I agree with the others. I think it's about creating both a culture of engagement and a culture of continuous learning and development, and really to stay competitive and remain relevant in this changing landscape. We have to create and encourage those kinds of opportunities. We also have a responsibility to continue to learn and test and explore the viability of new tech, and really need to understand how these shifts in technology and how people are using it are impacting public health. And quite honestly, I'm a prime example of the ways in which CDC has provided those kinds of opportunities. We have an opportunity to learn in the classroom. We learn the methods and the theories, and then, we have an opportunity to go out into the field and test some of those out and grapple with real life situations. And then here at CDC, we saw a business problem, we saw a business need, we saw an opportunity to leverage tech to address that and use data to help drive better decisions, in particular within emergency response. And there are opportunities within the agency to apply for funding, to write proposals. We presented our ideas, and we were able to ultimately develop and design a proof of concept. And it was through that process of still looking at ways to drive the agency mission, but also, I still consider myself fairly new to government, but I got to learn about government. I got to learn about tech. I'm not a technologist either, but applying that need and sort of having that opportunity to learn by doing, I think was really critical. And I think it's what ends up keeping CDC sort of on the cutting edge of science and putting science and data into action.
Fantastic. And David, tell us about how the DAU is adapting and delivering learning opportunities during these unprecedented times.
Boy, you got that right. This whole COVID environment has been very, very challenging for all educational providers. Whether you be a college or high school, elementary, and we're certainly no exception to that. In fiscal year 19, we delivered over 5 million training hours. 5 million training hours, and about half of those were in the classroom mode. And in the course of a couple of weeks, it just disappeared, leaving our students in critical need of the training and forcing us to rethink everything of our entire delivery model. So what the university initially did was we went ahead and we just said, okay, like many education providers, we'll just take what we've got and start doing it online through Zoom, or we use WebEx. And our instructors, with tremendous flexibility, were able to figure that medium out and take what they had and just started presenting it in a WebEx environment. But what we learned from that, and what we anticipated to learn from that, was that you just can't, what we call, lift and drop. You can't just take something from the classroom and just drop it into a virtual environment. So we've had to go back and in many cases start from scratch and redesign many of our entire courses from scratch to this new mode of delivery, where you can't, as an instructor, get the visual cues from the student as to whether he's understanding the material, where you just can't kill the guys with PowerPoint slides time after time. You have to really be overcompensating for interactivity to make sure you're drawing the students out and keeping them engaged and trying not to allow them to be multitasking and doing other things. So the biggest change we had to make was to shift to this virtual environment. And then secondly, go ahead and shift our content for that domain that we're now providing the instruction in. The second thing to take away from that is that we learned an awful lot, and we're not going back. Like many industries, COVID has been a an accelerator of many inevitable changes which are happening across society and our economy and the way we're doing things. You know, after looking at the business case, it became very, very clear to us it's going to be very, very difficult for the DAU to justify going back to these previous methods of delivery. So when we come back together, hopefully in just a few short months, we'll be able to go back to the classroom, but we won't because we've been able to pave the way for this new method of delivery. The final thing I'll say about that, it's not only DAU which has had to adapt, but our students as well. I think this virtual delivery area that COVID has forced upon us is putting a greater burden on our students, where they, rather than just sitting kind of semi-passively in a classroom being fed all kinds of information, they've got to be actively engaged in their learning and really take ownership for it. Some of them are able to make that turn, but there's a decent percentage of people who are just unable to get there, and we've got to have to adapt for that. So that's how we've adapted. I think it's really accelerated what was going to happen naturally, but it's a very exciting time to handle this change.
That's awesome, and it's a testament to agility, and it really echoes what we've heard here at Mayor Talk from many of the CIOs in the public sector, that some of the modernization that occurred in 5 months at the onset of the pandemic may have otherwise taken 5 years or more. So really sort of that ability to adapt. Excellent. All right, so online learning, I think we're all in agreement, is here to stay. It's critical in facilitating access to job-relevant skills at scale, whether that's national, state, and local governments who are looking to reinforce economic development programs, or whether those are government agencies who are looking to reskill their own employees. It really enables that widespread access and has the power to swiftly address immediate skills. So with that said, David, we're going to go back to you. Can you tell us and expand, is there anything else that we need to know about the role of online training in your organization and how that might continue to evolve?
Yeah, this is a great question. So thanks for it. So one of the great things about online training is that it really expands the solution set for you. Okay, when we're in the classroom, people are coming to our classroom, and it's our instructors who are delivering training that we prepared, and it worked fine. But now that we go to an online platform, it really allows us to seek partners. No longer am I confined just to a DAU product. Now I can find partners to help me expand what I've done and prevent me from having to duplicate what's already out there. By going online, we've recognized that it no longer made sense for DAU to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and months developing a course which I can find very easily through a partnership, through a licensing agreement, or borrowing it, or an exchange of something like that. So what this online training platform has really allowed us to do is expand our partnerships. And what we've done with Coursera is an example of that.
David, I think you're frozen, so I'm going to ask Sachi if she can give her response, and then we'll bounce back to you.
Yeah, so honestly, I think out of necessity, as we just heard too from David as well, we've had to shift to online everything. And we've had to adapt and adopt to new ways of doing business. And even though online training has been part of CDC's training program for some time now, as Emily was mentioning, I think now it's about scalability and adaptability. So being able to meet the needs of new and complex challenges as they continue to evolve. And as the public health landscape in particular continues to change, I think response activities are only going to continue to increase in complexity. And so really looking at how we address those evolving challenges, both in the fiscal and mission environments, and also adopting and adapting to these new ways of doing business, focused, sustained efforts and innovative approaches are needed. I sort of think about it as, it's like when you're standing on the edge of the pool and it's going to be cold and you're sort of gathering the courage to jump in. And in a sense, I think what COVID did is sort of come along and push us in to the deep end. And so really ready or not, like it or not, emerging tech, big data, it's here, and we have to learn how to work with it. I think it's, sort of sink or swim at this point. And what I think we've learned is that we have figured out how to tread water, and so now it's really about actually learning how to swim.
Excellent. And Emily, can you share some of the initiatives that Coursera has launched specifically with regard to digital upskilling, whether in big data, cloud computing, AI, and some of the other emerging areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So our approach to building digital capabilities really relies on understanding how digital capabilities fit together. So data and cloud and software engineering are all very interrelated when you talk about building applications or solutions. Mapping organizational goals to skill objectives. So in order to deliver the organizational goals, what skills do you need across the company? And then, as David put it, I think so eloquently, having the right skills matched to the right people, which is then the basis of deploying successful learning programs. That's why we designed our academies offering, starting with Data Science Academy. So it's a job-based learning program that's really targeted at the three objectives that we spoke to earlier. So first, developing those critical data skills for your technical functions. Second is driving data literacy for everyone across the agency. And third is reskilling internal staff for in-demand data roles. And each of the component programs are designed to be developing, again, the right skills by role and function. We call them skill sets. So we have skill sets to upskill. As a data scientist, what do I need to know to become specialized in R or computer vision or TensorFlow, again, depending on the work at hand. We have skill sets to develop literacy. So no matter who you are, to be able to make data-driven decisions and to partner effectively with technical teams to design and implement ML-powered solutions. And we have skill sets to reskill. So to become an entry-level data analyst or an entry-level data engineer from a different role that you're in today. And then the learning programs to deliver those skill sets are personalized to the individuals. So we have these skill sets, these skill proficiency targets for a given role and function, and we have the baseline skills that the individual has. And looking across the more than 4,000 courses and applied projects in the Coursera catalog, we serve up the most efficient content to close the gap, getting from your current skill to that skill set target to deliver the organization's needs. So that's really the core. Content is a blend of expert-led courses from top universities and industry, and then applied learning via guided projects. The learning platform really engages learners throughout the experience. And then, on the tail end, we're reporting on the learning metrics that agencies are actually interested in. So yes, it's helpful to know how many hours are spent learning, but you want to know the return on that investment. What skills are developed at what proficiency levels at the aggregate level, but also double clicking in to understand the particular individuals and their proficiencies and their potential, and using that to understand progress and prioritize future investments. So our first academy was Data Science Academy. We recently announced Coursera Academy solutions for software engineering and cloud, really rounding out the digital space. We've been delighted to see the reception by federal agencies across all three, and are excited for the continued partnership.
Thank you so much, Emily. And David, I'm going to bounce back to you. This is live TV, folks. So David, if you would like to finish your point before you froze with our technology.
Sure. I apologize for dropping offline there. I just had one more point I wanted to make from that previous question, and that is the idea of having more interactive tools for our students to really demonstrate mastery of these concepts. The idea of having demonstration labs, and I saw this in many of the Coursera courses, which forces the students to actually engage proactively in exercises. I thought was a very, very important immersive learning opportunity for the students, and many of the platforms and our Coursera partner in particular has that kind of capability. Ultimately, where I think I'm trying to push us to is the idea to, in this online environment, do more rigorous assessments of our students' needs that create low drag opportunities for our instructors as well. The idea of using machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to more fully assess student work products, I think is a great and rich opportunity for us to really take our online education to the next level and while maintaining the efficient, cost-effective way of delivering it. That's my last point. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great. We're going to move into our Q&A, but before we do, I wanted to give each of our participants one last moment to provide any last comments that they would like. Sachi, we're going to start with you. Is there anything else that's important for our audience to know?
Yeah, thanks. And, again, thanks for the opportunity to join today. I think we're really moving into this world of, or probably actually already have moved into this world of big data and emerging tech. And as we've heard from the others on the panel, I think really sort of preparing our workforce for how to engage and meet some of those challenges as we move forward are really, really critical and important questions to be thinking about. And so I'm really glad we've had some time dedicated today to talk about that.
And David?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for inviting me and giving me the chance to talk today. I think we spend an awful lot of time on the delivery end of the training, but we have seen that the greatest predictor of student success is the student's motivation. We can build all these wonderful training products and have tremendous labs and the best instructors in the world, but we've got to find a way to incentivize and motivate our students to take advantage of it, particularly in something that's hard like data science. My observation, and Emily, perhaps you'll support me on this, it takes a lot of persistence, and it's hard, and it's not all that easy. And you really need a motivated student who's incentivized to really take this training in order to be successful and make that critical pivot that we need to do in reskilling the workforce. Thanks.
And Emily.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that it's been a privilege to be here, Sachi and David. I've learned so much from the dialogue today, so thank you. I think, what today's conversation really brings home for me is three things. First is the data opportunity is huge, right? Sachi talked about it in decision science now more than ever at CDC. We talked about, developing ML-powered digital experiences. We talked about automating more of those human workflows. And we talked about how that opportunity is only growing, not just with the compute power and the proliferation of cloud solutions, but also now with all the digitization of experiences and workflows that are happening amid COVID, more data capture than ever before. And then I think the second thing that really stands out is that the challenges are real, right? Feeling like staff don't have the skills to do the job, feeling like the broader agency needs a cultural data literacy shift, feeling like it's hard to hire sufficiently to close the skills gaps and needing to understand solutions from within. And so I think then the third thing it just brings home for me is why I'm so excited about the partnerships with which we're working with a number of agencies to build human capacity and to build leadership and to unlock those opportunities and, working together to understand the roles and skills required. We can't do it in a vacuum, right? We do it in partnership with you. What does technical staff need to know? What does the broader agency need to know? And then delivering those solutions. And so, it's been an honor, obviously, to partner with Defense Acquisition University and others. And I'm just excited about the continued chance to unlock value from data, for citizens and for staff alike going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions. So our first question is from our audience in terms of retraining course recommendations for existing federal programmatic employees that want to be proficient in data. So I don't know, data, Emily or David, if that might be best suited to either one of you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it briefly. And then David, if you want to jump in as well, I think would be totally open to continuing the conversation offline and understanding more about the particular programs or investments across an agency that these individuals are managing, and correspondingly, what is their workflow and jobs to be done. And from there, parsing the component data needs. It sounds like a lot of big decisions would be being made, right? Managing large investments across the agency. And in that case, having a basic understanding of statistics, metrics, interpretation of data, using data for decision-making, also using data for storytelling and helping folks understand your opinion and bring them along with your direction. I think to the extent that the programs that the individual is managing are actually have some ML-powered solutions within them, then building an awareness in AI and ML. There's, for example, a course called Andrewing that doesn't require any programming in Python or building any neural nets. It's just about understanding what is and is not possible with AI and ML. Very case studies-based approach, very applied, very real for non-technical practitioners is another one that comes to mind. But again, as David spoke to, it's really about understanding the jobs to be done, and then for a given role, in order to accomplish those jobs, what are the skill sets that are needed? And we can work together to figure out the best learning programs to close the gap from where folks are today. Data-driven decision-making and an awareness of AI and ML certainly stand out, but happy to continue the conversation offline and would love to learn more about the use cases. David, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
The only thing I would add is nothing's better than success. And if you can show your students or organizations where ML or data science has helped them solve a particular problem or saved X amount of money or deliver better capability to your customers, those stories of success, those powerful examples, can really go a long way to bringing people around and rallying around this topic. And I try to share those with the students as much as we can.
Perfect. And I think we have time for one last question. Another audience question is that there are definitely benefits to online learning, cost savings, travel, etc. But some learners say they do better in the classroom setting. How do you handle that? And David, this might be right up your alley.
Yeah, thanks. So that's a very, very valid concern. And some people are better in the classroom. Some people prefer to work at their own pace. And we, as the education provider, have to try to meet the students where they're at. So I'll give you an example of what we did to deal with this. And specifically, we use this in our data analytics curriculum, is that we established office hours, where we designate an hour every week where we make faculty members available for students to call in. And then we take whatever time is needed to essentially hold the student's hand through the particular problem, so they don't feel like they're alone, that they have a relationship with an actual person, that they can, as best we can, simulate that classroom environment and facilitate the dialogue, which is so important to assure yourself that a student really knows what's going on. So what we have done is the establishment of those office hours. And for some students, it's really helped them bridge that gap.
That is fantastic. And we are coming down to our last few seconds. And so I would really like to, on behalf of Meritalk, thank Coursera once again for sponsoring today's webinar. I'd also like to thank our panelists today. This was a great conversation and discussion. I know got me really excited about the potential. I'd like to thank all of our audience members for joining us as well. And it's just a reminder that if you missed anything, there will be an archived version available of the webinar online, and we'll be sending links out to all participants. That's all from here for now. Please stay healthy and be well. Thank you all.